Now we will see some interview questions on IAM role and the IAM role using Terraform. So let's proceed to the further question. First question, what is an IAM role in AWS? So an IAM role is an AWS identity and access management entity that defines a set of permissions for making AWS service request. It is not associated with a specific user or group but can be assumed by user services or AWS resources. Next question is, how is an IAM role different from an IAM user? An IAM user represents a person or service with unique security credentials, while an IAM role is an entity that defines a set of permissions and can be assumed by users, services, or resources users have resources. Users have fixed credentials, whereas roles are assumed dynamically. Next question is, why will you use IAM roles? IAM roles are used for delegating permissions to entities without the need to share long-term credentials. They are often used in scenarios where temporary access is needed, such as granting permission to AWS services, federated users, or cross-account access. How do you assume an IAM role? IAM role can be assumed using AWS Identity and Access Management temporary security credentials. Users or services can assume a role by making a call to the AWS Security Token services, which returns temporary credentials to be used for subsequent requests. Next question is, what is the purpose of IAM role trust relationships? Trust relationships define which entities are allowed to assume a particular IAM role. It is specified in a JSON policy document attached to the role and outlines the conditions under which the role can be assumed. Next question, explain the concept of cross-account IAM roles. Cross-account IAM roles allow access to resources in one AWS account from another account by establishing trust relationships between accounts. A role in one account can be assumed by a user or resource in another account, facilitating secure access across accounts. Next question is, how do you restrict access to an IAM role to specific IP addresses? IAM roles themselves do not have a direct mechanism for IP-based restrictions. However, you can implement such restrictions by using IAM policies in conjunction with other AWS services like AWS Identity and Access Management Condition Keys, Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, that is VPC, or AWS WAF. Next question is, what is the purpose of IAM role session policies? IAM role session policies are inline policies that can be attached directly to a role. They define what actions and resources are allowed or denied during the duration of a role's temporary security credentials. Session policies are often used to further limit permissions for assumed roles. Next question is, how do you rotate IAM role credentials? IAM role credentials can be rotated by updating the roles policies or by rotating the credentials of the AWS services or entity that assumes the role. For example, if an EC2 instance assumes a role, you can update the instance profile or terminate and relaunch the instance to obtain new temporary credentials. Next question is, what is the difference between IAM role and IAM group? An IAM role is an entity that defines a set of permissions and can be assumed by users, services, or resources. On the other hand, an IAM group is a collection of IAM users. Roles are not tied to specific users but are assumed dynamically, while groups are used to simplify the management of user permissions. Next question, what is the difference between instance profile and role? So role represents a set of permissions that you can apply to user groups or resources, while provides temporary security credentials can be assumed by AWS services, IAM users, or other resources. And the instance profile specifically used to grant IAM roles to EC2 instance eliminates the need to store long-term credentials on EC2 instances associated with the EC2 instances at launch time. Next question is, can an instance profile assume a role? No. An instance profile itself cannot assume a role. Instead, an instance profile is a container for an IAM role, and it allows an AWS resource such as an EC2 instance to assume that role. The role, not the instance profile, is the entity that can be assumed by the other AWS entities. When you associate an IAM role with an EC2 instance, you are in essence granting the instance the permission defined in that role. The instance assumes the role and receives temporary security credentials that it can use to make AWS API requests. To clarify, you create an IAM role, you create an instance profile, you associate the IAM role with the instance profile, and then the instance profile is further associated with an EC2 instance. This separation allows for better security practices because it ensures that permissions are not directly attached to the instance but rather to the IAM role that the instance assumes. Can instance profile have more than one role? No, an instance profile in AWS can only be associated with a single IAM role. Each instance profile is essentially a container for a single IAM role, and this association is made at the time of instance launch. When you create an instance profile, you specify the IAM role that you want to associate with it. This association cannot be changed or updated without creating a new instance profile and associating it with a different IAM role. So next question is, what is the difference between AWS account and role? An AWS account is a container for AWS resources and services, and each account operates independently with its own billing and configuration. An AWS role is a set of permissions that can be assumed by users, services, or resource dynamically, providing a way to delegate permissions and enhance security. In practice, AWS accounts are used for organizational and billing purposes, while roles are used to define and control permissions within accounts and for enabling secure access across accounts. Roles are a key component of identity and access management in AWS. So, there are some interview questions for the IAM role using Terraform. So they may ask you like, explain the purpose of the IAM role created in this Terraform code. So if you have the code in front of you, they may ask such question. So you have to give the answer like this, the IAM role name example role. So in this case, they have given the example role. You may give the name whatever you want, and is created to assume by AWS instance, and it has attached policy. So in our case, we have given the Amazon S3 full access that grants full access to Amazon S3. Now next question may be, what is the significance of the assume role policy block? So this block specifies the trust relationship for the role. So EC2 service to assume the role by specifying the necessary trust policy in JSON format. Next question may be, how can you attach policies to an IAM role in Terraform? So the policy is attached using the AWS IAM role policy attachment resource. Here in our example, we are giving the code AWS S3 full access. So next question may be, what happens when an EC2 instance assumes this role? So answer will be, if the instance assumes this role, it is obtained temporary security credentials that allows it to perform actions defined by the attached policy. So for our case, we have attached the S3 bucket access. So it will have the permissions to work in that resource, particular resource. Now the next question may be, explain the significance of the effect allow statement in the assume role policy. So the effect and allow statement indicates that the specified actions are allowed. With effect in front of that allow is written, that means it allows the EC2 service to assume the role as defined by the STS assume role action. Now next question will be, how will you modify this Terraform code to add more policies to the IAM role? So in the AWS IAM role policy attachment block, you can attach additional policy. You just have to specify the policy ARN and the role to which the policy should be attached. Next question, what is the purpose of the IAM role's unique name? The name is a user-defined identifier for the IAM role. It must be unique within the AWS account. The role's name is used in various AWS API calls and is a way to reference the role in Terraform code. So it will be used for the referring in the Terraform code. How will you modify this code to create IAM roles in multiple AWS regions? For this question, the answer will be you can create a separate Terraform configuration file for each region, each with its own provider AWS block specifying the desired region. Now, next question will be explain the role of STS assume role action in the trust policy. So, this action allows the specified entity to assume the IAM role. In this case, we have using the EC2 service, so it will assume the IAM role. And the critical part of the trust policy that enables delegation of permission. So, it will provide the permissions also. Next question is, how can you verify that the IAM role has been successfully created using Terraform? So after running the Terraform apply, you can check the AWS management console or use the AWS CLI to verify existence of the IAM role. So that what I have shown you in the previous video. So that's it. These are some questions which may be asked in interview. Thanks.